Stephen King's It is arguably the master of horror's most ambitious novel. It took 4 years to finish and took the horror genre by storm in its publishing year of 1986. With over 1,000 pages, it's not hard to see that King put the same passion and affinity for genuine terror into this novel as he does with all others. The story, if you're not already familiar, is the story of the small town of Derry, Maine, and the mysterious vanishing of children that occurs almost exactly every 27 years. It chronicles the journeys of 7 young children who call the town home as they slowly unravel the mysteries and horrors of what is truly the culprit of all the disappearing kids in the town. As they each have their own horrifying experiences, seeing things that are seemingly impossible and eventually, as if it were destiny, coming together to face their fears together. Uniting against Pennywise the Dancing Clown to put an end to the terror once and for all. Now, it has many different themes and symbols throughout it, from the almighty turtle to the differences between the fears of children and the fears of adults. However, the most prominent and most important symbol in the entire book is that of the circle. In this essay, I'll be breaking down the symbolism of the circle in Stephen King's writing into 3 categories: literal images of the circle, the spiritual meaning of the circle, and the historical background of the circle as a symbol. The circle has been around as a basic shape since the conception of the universe. While not a true circle, but rather a spheroid, the basic shape of the planets, the sun, the galaxies, and the stars are generally round in shape. Ancient civilizations used the shape as a staple in their culture, architecture, and art. For example, the Mayan calendar is circular in shape and is generally considered to be the most accurate calendar ever developed before the modern age. Not to mention the imagery of angelic halos in medieval and Renaissance artwork, and the circular-shaped sun often depicted in Egyptian hieroglyphs and painting. Now to relate this to It. It in the novel is not just a clown or any other thing it may choose to show up as, but it is a celestial being from the Macroverse that has existed for at least millions of years, and thus has been in existence for the entire evolution of humanity as a species. This being said, the circle essentially is a representation of a shape with no sides and is conceptually infinite, looping back around on an endless loop for eternity until an outside force may break it. The circle represents the infinite and eternity, the same eternity in which it resides. In the novel, the concept of infinity and a constant repeating cycle of terror is essentially the main focus. Ever since anyone in Derry can remember, it has happened every 27 years without fail, always capped off with a major disaster that ravages the town and leaves plenty of bodies in its wake. This cycle has continued through the lifetimes of many citizens of Derry and is even chronicled in Mike Hanlon's journal throughout the novel, with It or Pennywise showing up each time a major massacre occurs. It's quite literally a circle of terror and death. Another instance of the circle shows up in the connection of the Losers Club members to each other, eventually used to defeat it finally. By the end of the novel, with Pennywise defeated for the first time and the circle almost severed, the children create an entirely new circle, literally and figuratively, with their bleeding hands locked, ensuring the circle will be reassembled again if and when it's deemed necessary. The circle is then broken, and the children slowly begin to drift apart from one another and forget the events that transpired over their fateful summer vacation. They finally escape the circle. Or so they thought. Even as they forget, the power of the circle shows itself in their lives, as each member falls into a familiar part of their childhood in one way or another, without realizing it. Bill finds himself married to a woman who largely resembles Beverly, whom he formerly had immense feelings for during his childhood. Similarly, Eddie becomes the spouse of a woman with the same obsessive care for his health as his late mother, and Beverly marries an abusive man who itemizes her in the same way her father used to. Richie makes a career out of his voices, which he annoyed his childhood friends with constantly, and finds himself using the voices in a similar manner to the way he did when he was young. Ben Hanscom manages to get his weight in check and uses his childhood fascination of engineering to design a building similar in style to the public library he used to admire as a child, and also has a constant reminder of his childhood with the letter H carved into his stomach by his childhood bully, Henry Bowers. Mike's connection to the circle remains solely because he did as well, remaining in his childhood hometown into his middle age. Stan is the only one who seemed to be able to escape the power of the circle, as is demonstrated by his eventual suicide after Mike's fateful call. As a result, the circle is threatened as a whole and struggles to remain intact, especially due to the fact that he is essentially its creator, as the initiator of the blood pact they made 27 years prior. As the circle of It is temporarily severed by the kids in the beginning, it eventually reassembles itself and resurfaces once again, much like the circle created by the children shows up again and the events of their childhood begin to unfold once more. As they all reunite, they begin to remember the events of the fateful summer that encompassed their battle against It. As a result of this, the cycle picks up once more, and small remnants of their past selves begin to show up. The circle loops once again as Bill's stutter returns after years of being beaten. Beverly visits her childhood home and is tormented by the mental image of her father. Ben finds a book he previously checked out from the library as a child. Richie is haunted by the massive statue of Paul Bunyan, just like he was as a kid. And Eddie eventually breaks his arm, just as he did in their journey as children, albeit in a different way. And the group as a whole are tormented by Pennywise, and Henry Bowers begins to hunt them down, in the same manner as the events that transpired almost 3 decades prior. Now we'll get into the spiritual representation of the circle as a symbol. It has a magical value as a protective agent and indicates the end of the process of individuation of striving towards psychic wholeness and self-realization. Julian 71. The circle is considered to be representative of togetherness and unity for the sake of protection and enlightenment. It is symbolic of God's infinite love, or in the case of the novel, its infinite presence in the lives of the children, as is symbolized in images of the moon and sun. At one point in the book, it is stated that Henry Bowers was known to talk to the moon from his cell at the asylum he lives at and is visited by Pennywise, who shows his face to Henry on the surface of the moon. The protective powers of the circle are seemingly limitless, as is the shape of the circle itself. The circle assembled by the children in the novel is said to have an eerie sense of sheer power, as pointed out by Bill Denbrough, as they lock hands and promise to return if it ever did. The circle is reconstructed as it resurfaces, and its protective properties prevail over the circular cycle of Pennywise or it. The circle is representative of the togetherness of many parts under one whole, in this case the unification of the kids as they band together with a common enemy and come together essentially as one being to break the cycle of it. In their reunion as adults to defeat it once more, the circle is once again broken, both literally and figuratively. Stan's suicide marks a monumental shift in the power of the circle, but eventually acts as a bond to reunify the group under a common goal once more. Each time the circle is broken, much like that of it is always reconstructed in one way or another. Both times the circle of it was broken, so was the circle of the friends that broke it. The first time, as children, their circle had served its purpose and began to crumble upon itself. It was reunified by Beverly, as their looming sense of lust for the sole female member took hold and allowed them to come together once more in order to escape. For the sake of YouTube censorship guidelines, I'll avoid getting into the specifics of this scene. It's best understood if you read the novel. The circle is then broken seemingly forever, as the kids gradually go their separate ways and live their lives in peace. However, as soon as Pennywise returns and the cycle of it continues despite their efforts, the circle is reassembled once again just the same. Once it is defeated and the cycle officially put to an end, the circle is broken for a final time as each member once again goes their separate ways and slowly forgets, much like the events of their childhood. This, of course, implies that the power of the two circles, that of it and that of the Losers Club, are eternally connected and will come at odds once more should it show itself once again. The final note I will leave you with is this: the image of two circles constantly connected in an endless loop, the infinity sign, the universal symbol for something that goes on for eternity. Thank you for watching, and I hope to see your own ideas and insight in the comments below. If I overlook something, feel free to point it out, and if you have any requests for future essays, feel free to leave them, and I will consider covering it, given that I am knowledgeable enough about the subject matter.